Welcome to GRE Snack, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exam. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Dr. Don Martin from Grad School Road Map with us. And Don, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, be happy to, Tyler. And thanks again for having me back. I very much enjoy these conversations that we have from time to time. I guess that probably the biggest piece of information your audience would be interested in knowing about me is that my entire career has been spent in the field of enrollment management and more particularly in the area of graduate admissions. I served as an admissions professional and for most of these years an admissions dean from 1980 until 2008. That was 28 years at institutions such as Columbia, the University of Chicago, Northwestern University. During that 28-year period, I had the privilege of evaluating over 125,000 applications. So what I'll be sharing with you today is based on that level of experience and decision making. In 2008, I started a company called Grad School Road Map. That was in conjunction with the publishing of my book called Roadmap for Graduate Study. And since then, I've been working with graduate school applicants individually who are preparing their applications for a variety of fields in the graduate arena. This is something I love to talk about, as you know. And once again, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, really excited to have you back. And yeah, I'm excited for today's topic. It's basically the opposite of the seven deadly sins, right? It's like the seven good things that you can do. So let's start. I mean, I'm hoping that these are not just like one-to-one opposites of what we had talked about before. I feel like these are going to be a little different.
They are not.
Um,
They are not. I can assure you that that is the case. These are not opposites. Um, but I will say that I always like to add these when I do a presentation because I don't want applicants to think that there's only things that you do that are negatively noticed, but there are some things you can do that will truly be positively noticed. And so let me share what these are, and then obviously I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if down the road you want to talk about one of these more in depth, we can always do that. But here they
sure.
are, the seven what I call the seven ways to get positively noticed as an applicant. And as our listeners are going to discover, these are not impossible to achieve by any means. Some of them are no brainers at all. But again, as I mentioned the last time we spoke about the ways to get negatively noticed, sometimes you would think you wouldn't have to talk about this, but you do. So anyway, first of all, the biggest way to get noticed, honestly, is to be yourself. Again, I believe admissions committees do a disservice to applicants by giving them this impression that they have to be Superman or Superwoman and be perfect and show no weakness or anything other than being perfect. And that can lead to a temptation for someone to try and pretend that they are some sort of personality that they think the admissions committee is looking for. I think most adults would say that it's pretty easy to detect when someone is being fake. When you're at a dinner party or a work event, or you're meeting someone in a business
Mhm.
capacity, soon after you have a chance to start talking with them, you kind of get an impression, either this person's on the level with me or something's wrong here. This person is not being genuine. And that if it's the latter, that doesn't cause you to say, oh, I really want to get to know this person better. It's the exact opposite. You tend to back away. And So,
Mhm.
admissions folks, we're not psychologists per se, but we are, grown individuals, and we meet thousands of candidates every year, or hundreds at least, and you begin to be able to tell who's being real and who isn't. So don't
Mhm.
try to become someone you're not. Just be who you are. There's only one of you. There isn't anyone else like you. And that's almost always a good thing, even though some people may not feel that way. That's a very good thing. So
Mhm.
that's my first piece of advice. Just let the committee, through your essays, through your resume, through whatever you submit, through any phone conversations, emails, just be yourself. Number two, it would be entirely appropriate, and this is done less often, and that's why it can make a very positive impression, for you to send a cover letter with your application. Of course, now I would suggest you not send this via email. I would suggest you send a letter through the regular mail, put a stamp on it, hand address the envelope. Don't type it, hand address it to the dean. If you know the name of the dean of admissions, put the name, Dr. Don Martin,
Mhm.
care of whatever, or admissions committee, whatever you have. And send, now you don't have to handwrite the letter, you can type that, but let them know how excited you are about applying to their program. You could start off by saying, yesterday I submitted my electronic application for your master's program, or tomorrow I will be submitting this. And then give them at least one reason why you decided to apply. And that reason should not be able to be repeated about any other school to which you're applying. In other words, you don't
Mhm.
say you have a great alumni network, or you have great facilities, or you have great faculty, or you have a great placement percentage. So many programs can say that. You want to be very specific about something in their program that you notice that nobody else has, that drew you to that. And then lastly, if I obviously don't encourage you to do this to every one of the schools, otherwise you would not be telling the truth. But if one of these schools is your top choice, as you close the letter, you to all of them, you could say, "I hope to be admitted." Of course, who wants to be denied? But if there's one that is your first choice, and you know that now, and you also know that if you're offered admission, you will completely discontinue your other applications and submit a deposit, and you're going to go there. Tell them that. Tell them, if you admit me, I'm coming. You're my first choice. Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
letting them know that. So that's something that can make a difference and is not as often done.
Well, okay, so I want to dig into this first, if you don't mind. Um, so I'm like, I guess I just want you to like explain why that's important. Like why, like sure, you can send this letter to everybody, right? But why does it matter to receive that letter, and why is it also kind of rare to receive that letter and makes you stand out?
The reason that it is helpful in many cases is because it's so rarely done. Most applicants do not do this. They just send in their materials like they're supposed to on a certain deadline. They send in their electronic application. But a personal letter I can tell you, I just know based on the kinds of mail that comes into an office. If I asked my administrative assistant when I worked at Chicago Booth, when I worked that's the Chicago Booth School of Business, by the way, when I worked at Northwestern, when I worked at Columbia, I asked my administrative assistant to actually keep letters like this and paperclip them on the front of the application folder so that I could see this letter that was written, because it happens so rarely. And a genuine letter, as I said, explaining what it was or is about this program that led that applicant to apply, that is truly something that we offer that nobody else does, is a very impressive extra step to take. And
Mhm.
now I'm glad.
Well, and it demonstrates interest, right? Which is a key concept that I think a lot of people miss.
It absolutely does. And it also it lets someone know that this applicant is not, doing anything over the top or out of the box. but they're simply personally expressing their interest in the program. Now, will every dean of admissions do what I did and ask their staff or their team to set these letters aside? Probably not. I don't know that every dean will do, but I believe many will. And will this automatically guarantee admission? No. But here's what can also happen, Tyler. Let's say there's a candidate who isn't going to be admitted right off the bat, but for whom there is some interest. In certain cases, a letter of this kind could make the difference between that individual being denied or placed on a waiting list. Just that additional
Mhm.
piece of special interest in the program, taking the time to do their homework and let you know that they really did evaluate your program, not just some general comment. That
Mhm.
can make a difference. So that would be my response to your question.
Okay. Yeah. So then, what's the third thing?
The third area of way to get noticed, this is another thing I don't think applicants always realize, is the importance of good letters of recommendation. I'm going to make a statement that may come as a shock, I don't know, but I would say in my 28 years of evaluating applicants, looking at thousands of applications, the number of times that recommendation letters were really helpful to me might be 5 to 10% of the time. The rest of the time, they were a waste. I didn't even end up reading most of them because the applicant clearly did not ask the recommender to help them by preparing a letter that indicates that you've read what the admissions committee is asking you for and you're giving them that information, especially
Right.
if you're asked. Most recommenders are going to be asked to discuss strengths and weaknesses of a candidate. That's a typical recommender type question. And
Mhm.
some institutions go even further. They'll have a little grid on the recommendation form where the recommender is asked to rate that candidate from outstanding to poor. It might be outstanding, excellent, good, fair, poor on a variety of character traits, communication
Mhm.
skills, teamwork ability, academic curiosity, ethics, integrity, whatever it is. If a recommender checks every single box outstanding, that lessens their credibility immediately because nobody that I've ever met is completely perfect on everything like that. No one. Um, if they're asked for a strength, they need to provide
Mhm.
an example. If somebody recommended you to me, Tyler, and they said Tyler is a phenomenal communicator, he just has this innate, almost uncanny ability to effectively communicate with others. Well, that's all well and
Mhm.
good, but my question to the recommender is, okay, how do you know that? What do you base that on? Otherwise, it looks like they pulled something out of a hat that they thought would sound good. If they're asked to discuss a weakness, they need to discuss one. If
Mhm.
they say this candidate doesn't have any weaknesses, that's that's the worst thing to say. We're not looking, as I said, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for human beings who have some skills, but who also know themselves well enough to know that they have things to work on. So recommenders don't just assume that because somebody is well known. I got a letter of recommendation one time from the then Vice President of the United States for a candidate that was 2 sentences long. That was it. That applicant was denied, by the way. They were not admitted.
Mhm.
So just be careful with your recommenders. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also important, like, it's probably better to have a recommender that knows you very well and can speak to you very well than to have somebody famous, basically.
absolutely. I can't believe you said that. That's such a good point. My definition of a good recommender is someone who knows you long enough and well enough to really answer the questions. It is not their title that is going to do something for you. It really isn't. contrary to popular belief. That is not what does it, I can assure you.
Yeah.
My next point is probably the most, I think some people might say they think this is the most simplistic of anything I would say, but I'm going to say it anyway. You want to smile when you are interacting with the admissions office, or even if you're on a phone call. Now, I don't mean that you just have a freeze frame with a smile on your face, but I'm talking about smiling a little bit when you first go up to meet someone. Smile at them, say hello. My name is Don Martin. I'm glad to be here. A smile breaks the ice on many levels. It just causes you to relax a little bit because you're already going to be nervous. If you're going there for an interview, a campus visit, you have a virtual call with someone, you've got a phone call, whatever. They've done studies on this. Even when you're not looking at someone, when you're smiling, even on the phone, it just sounds better. It sounds, and it causes you to relax a little bit. Some people get so nervous about a visit, an appointment, an interview, a conversation, and they look stone-faced. They're almost petrified. And that can send a message. The interviewer can't read your mind. They don't know what's going on, but it could look like you don't want to talk with them, or you're bored to be there. So just start off, especially with a smile. It breaks the ice and it creates a much better, I have to tell you, first impressions can also make a difference. They really can. So that's an easy one. That's something every single one of us can try to do and try to remember to do. My fifth one is be sure to stay calm even if something happens to go wrong once you've submitted your application. Let's say that you had an interview scheduled on a Wednesday with a campus visit, and a student was going to meet you to take you around campus, and you get there on Wednesday and they had you down for Thursday. So there's no student to meet you. They have to scramble to do an interview. They're not able to give you a campus tour because of whatever else was going on that day. Obviously, they did not do that on purpose. Let's say that even though you submit electronic applications now, in most cases, admissions committees still print out everything you submit and put it in a file folder on their end. And it's very possible that something you sent to them might slip out on the floor or behind someone's file cabinet, and they end up contacting you that they need a document that you already sent, like a transcript or a recommend. Tyler, I could write a book, truly, on the responses of applicants when we had the courtesy to contact them and tell them that something was missing from their application. They would swear they hung up on us. They would say we were stupid. What's wrong with you people? Can't you keep track of a simple app? And, that can make a huge difference. If that's how you respond to a genuine error that was not intentional, what does that say about the way you'll behave in a classroom setting or with a group of people if something rubs you the wrong way? So if something happens, keep your cool. Remember, this is not a test. They're not trying to do this to you. Something went wrong. Okay, that's not the most thrilling thing, but if they're missing something, just ask them when you can send it, how you want them to send it to you. That is, or how you want you to send it to them. That's what really can make a huge difference. We had an applicant one time. This was back during paper applications. This was at the Booth School of Business. We lost her entire application. We lost it. I don't know where it went, but it was gone. And I had to call her and tell her that. And it was during the time I was calling students to tell them they've been admitted. And that's what she thought I was telling her. And then I had to, say, no, I'm sorry, we're not that far along, and tell her that we lost the application. Her first words, she had no practice. She didn't know this was happening. She said, okay, well, what can I do? And right then and there, I made the decision. I was admitting her. Now, thank God she had a good application when it came in. But I said, look, you resend everything. We'll pay for it. And when we get it, I'll give you a holler. So I called her. I said, you've been denied. No, I'm teasing. I said, you've been admitted. And I said, I just want you to know that in addition to your application, your attitude about what happened when this occurred an impression on all of us in the admissions office.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just like, I mean, you could almost boil down the last couple of things that you've said to just like people who work in admissions offices are people, they're human.
Got it.
You should treat them well, treat them with respect, and believe it or not, they'll like you if you do that.
Well, it's sadly to say in this day and age, this happens less often. It's just not the way people often conduct themselves in certain settings. And it's sad, but it's the reality. So when you have someone that sends a cover letter, that smiles, that uses good recommendation letters, that keeps their cool, these kinds of things, they start to add up. They honestly do. And it may, and when you're the more selective the program, where you have, in my case, when I worked at Chicago Booth, I had 5 to 10 applicants for every person I could admit. So everything comes into play when you're evaluating candidates. It's not just what's on paper. It's how they conduct themselves. My sixth and next to last tip is, again, ask questions. This is a bit of a reverse of the last one, I will tell you that, but it's so important. Ask questions that demonstrate that you just did your homework about this program and you're wanting to know something more about them, which is great. But in addition, something that's not readily available on their website or in their materials. That shows definite due diligence on the part of the applicant, and believe me, it goes a long way. Lastly, be sure to let the committees know. Now, don't overdo this. Don't send them a message every week. But when you do submit your application, as I said, if you do that cover letter or after an interview, let them know you want to be there. Some people think that that
Mhm.
sounds braggadocious or it sounds arrogant or too untoward. Absolutely not. If you do it well and you do it at the like after it, let's say you've been to a admissions event, you've had an interview, you've had a campus visit, whatever. Those are times to let them know I really am interested in your program. Nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Every so often sprinkled in. And if these things are done along with the submission of a competitive application, I will absolutely tell you, you put yourself in a very much of a competitive position over some other applicants who might also be submitting pretty good applications.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I would almost summarize everything you just said by like, do the details
Yep.
and do them well. I think that basically the best thing you can do in doing is like be really thoughtful about which schools you're applying to and then put in the effort to really make those applications feel like they're the only school you're applying to. I don't know if that's repeating what you're saying.
No, no, I like what you're saying. It's this is your one shot at making an impression, and we say this so much that it probably becomes old hat. But first impressions and continuing good impressions are very powerful with anyone. And the first
Mhm.
impression you have of someone, Tyler, or I have of someone, it takes a lot to change that. And if you make a
Yeah.
positive impression and then you keep adding to that, everybody's going to submit applications. They're all going to try to put their best foot forward, hopefully. But these are some extra things that can just take you a bit higher. As I said, these aren't terribly, they're not brain science. They're not difficult. They're just things to remember to do as a complete package. And if you do, I do believe it makes a difference. It certainly did for me as a dean of admission.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been GRE Snacks. Yeah. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Dr. Don Martin from the Grad School Road Map. And Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free at achievable.me.